All right, guys. So today I want to talk about profitability of Shopify stores. So first of all, do you think this store is profitable? I have shown the store quite often in my previous videos. And for example, if we take a certain month or a week, do you think this is profitable? And what do you think is the actual take-home net profit margin of the store, or the EBITDA, if you will? So take a guess, because I will be very transparent and I'll show you the exact profitability of the store. Really, my takeaways of having run a bunch of stores and the kind of takeaways of how I have improved the profitability of my stores, and hopefully transferable to how you can improve the profitability of your stores. Also, how to track profitability to the cent, the apps and the tools that I use to track profitability and do so in an automated way, and all the pros and cons that I've experienced by using those tools. And last but not least, also like the expectations and the benchmarks of net profit margins for Shopify stores, and that at different sizes of Shopify stores. Because of course, if you're just starting off and you're just scaling, your profit margin will be different than if you're a much larger store that already hit a certain amount of critical mass and size. And I want to talk about, again, what you should expect, because to be honest, I think this topic is not talked about so much. A lot of people just show their top line revenue figures, as I do, and to be fair, it is just what Shopify sees, and that's, if you just go in the analytics page of Shopify, it'll just show you those KPIs, right? Your conversion funnel, your total sales. It's not going to show you profitability, because Shopify does not know all your costs, right? And that's where you need to use additional tools, additional apps that integrate with Shopify that then allow you to calculate the profitability. And that's sometimes quite tricky, because you have all kinds of cash flow considerations, all kinds of accounting considerations. And there's a lot to unpack there. And that's what I want to discuss. And hopefully also there'll be some takeaways for you to improve the profitability of your store. So let's jump straight in. All right, guys, so let's talk about profitability and everything around it. So first of all, let me actually show you a bit more history of the store. Let's just pull up an entire year. Let's just do from May to, end of July here. Great, that's actually a bit more than a year. And you see that the store is very seasonal. And I can also show you the profitability for the entire year, but in the beginning, we're going to start on a actually weekly basis. And that's because we actually track our profitability with a special report week by week, and we optimize on a weekly basis, right? We see our margins at the end of every week. So actually on every Friday, we check our margins, we check our gross margins, our net profit margins, our contribution margins, etc., all of our costs, and we adjust, right? And we make conclusions and we make changes based on those weekly reports, right? So if we, for example, just select the last month, which I started off with, obviously the beginning of July was stronger. Again, it's stronger in terms of revenue, not necessarily in terms of profit margin. Actually, a very interesting point that we sometimes see with our stores is that a higher revenue does not always equal higher profit margin, because typically, if we really push the envelope in terms of especially CPC ads, right, and really going hard on our advertising campaigns, we can squeeze out some more revenue, right, but it won't be at such a high profit margin, because the ROAS won't be that high anymore if we're really pushing the marketing spend above and beyond where our optimal level is, right? Because then, Facebook, TikTok, or wherever we're spending our marketing dollars with is going to be pushing our ad to people who are a bit less interested, a bit less relevant to our product and our niche. So you should always watch out in terms of profit margin. Obviously, if you just keep the profit margin, obviously a higher revenue will equal a higher profit in terms of just absolute dollar amount. But of course, here, I really also want to talk about the margins and not just the absolute figures, because the absolute figures just really depend on how big your store is, right? And again, if you're making 20K instead of 200K, or 20 million instead of 200K, right? Obviously, that story will be very different, but the margin is something I think that we can talk about, especially because I do want to focus on Shopify and really D2C Shopify stores around the size range. And really, I think stores up to 5 million in revenue a year is typically where I feel like this information will apply to the most. Obviously, if you're much bigger, then you'll probably already have other systems in terms of tracking and optimizing profitability to some extent. So what tool do I use actually for tracking profitability? I use Lifetimely. Again, I'm not affiliated with them, and I'm actually going to talk about the pros and cons of Lifetimely. They are a good app, so we tried quite a few in the beginning. So I don't know, if you literally in the Shopify App Store, if you type in profitability, you're going to get a bunch of apps. Exactly. So Lifetimely is the one we use, but again, I'm sure a bunch of you are using maybe some of the other apps. a lot of them obviously are quite similar in terms of they obviously, try to accomplish the same goal. And again, different price points and different pros and cons. So let's talk about some. Let's jump into our Lifetimely for one of our stores. So it's loading. And here you can see the profit, like the first dashboard in terms of our profitability, right? And this week we made 83K in sales. Out of that, 30K actually marketing costs, 45 in COGS, and just actually a net profit of 7K, right? So the profit margin here is actually not that high. And you can actually see there's some days where we're actually making a net profit margin. And I think this is the first kind of takeaway that I see is that, first of all, you don't have to be profitable every single day. Obviously, it's the average that matters, right? And we definitely see some days where we're not profitable, but that gets compensated by the days that we are much more profitable. And obviously, in the end, if we're profitable at the end of that time period, that's, of course, a good thing if you're optimizing for that, which most people are. Why I like Lifetimely, and also talking about some of the pros and cons, is, let me move my camera here a bit. They have integrations that are quite handy, right? So you actually integrate with Google Ads, Facebook Ads, TikTok Ads. Like you can see, we have those integrations. We actually even had Microsoft. We even ran some Bing ads, believe it or not, for like a couple of weeks at some point. So we could integrate even that in case that's something that's relevant for you. But the point is that once you're connected to all those marketing channels, right, the costs get pulled automatically, right? Because you can obviously imagine the challenge is that you spend money on Facebook or on TikTok or whatever, and you don't know exactly what your profit margin is, right? Unless, for example, again, so this is the big topic in terms of looking at cash flows versus kind of on an accrual basis, right? And what Lifetime does really well is that if you spend X dollars on Facebook, right, even if it didn't actually get booked off your credit card, right? Because again, Facebook has different limits where you need to spend up to, like, let's say 1K, whatever you've unlocked before it actually deducts it from your bank account, right, from your credit card. Even if it hasn't deducted from your credit card, Lifetimely will just attribute the exact dollar amount you spent that day because they're connected to your Facebook account and they see exactly how much you've spent, even if you haven't actually spent it yet in terms of cash flow. And that's really powerful because that way you can literally by minute track your profitability, right? And like you see just now, it refreshed, as well as it just, or maybe not minute by minute, but like definitely on I would say 15-minute basis, you can really track your profitability. And it's actually pretty similar with the other settings. If you play around with the costs and expenses, what it does is it automatically takes the COGS from your product page, right? So in your product page, obviously you have the price, but you also put the COGS, right, in the product page settings. And Lifetimely will take that as your COGS, as your cost of goods sold, if you do not provide any further information. However, in the settings, you can override the COGS that are in your Shopify store with the COGS that you provide directly to Lifetimely. And that way you can, have even more accurate cost of goods and gross margins, right? In case you have to, right? To be honest, if you're just really organized with the COGS settings in your Shopify product pages, then everything will happen automatically, right? And beyond that, again, you can integrate with other providers also in terms of, again, here ShipStation, but also other logistics providers. If not, then you manually put how much money, for example, you spend in terms of fulfillment or shipping per order on average, and then it factors that in. It also automatically factors in discounts that you make on, that you provide to your customers, any refunds, anything of that nature gets automatic. Everything you can pull directly from Shopify, it pulls directly from Shopify. So actually a few of, let's go back to the income statement. So first of all, Lifetimely, you can create this beautiful chart versus a table format. And here there's also two different formats. There's the kind of breakdown, which is more of like the income statement, like day by day. It gives you the breakdown between sales, COGS, marketing, contribution margin, net profit margin, and the tiles. The tiles was like kind of like how they started off with, and they kind of shifted to the breakdown, which is more of an income statement. And to be honest, is just, I think for me, I prefer that, right? Because you can actually download this into an Excel. And that's what we do every week to create the report that I'm going to show you now. Why? And this is now coming to the negatives of Lifetimely, to be honest, because I've only said good things about it, and generally I do like the app. But the negatives is that I actually think this income statement, you cannot customize it. And for example, it doesn't have a gross profit line item, which always bothers me, right? It just gives you the sales and it gives you the COGS and then the contribution margin, but I want the gross margin as well. And that's why we always need to download into CSV. Then we have a macro on the Google Sheets, essentially running it in a different format and creating something like this. So this is what we create on a weekly basis. And this is literally a CSV download from Lifetimely. So it's the exact same figures. So this is week starting June 27th to whatever the next 7 days are. So until July 3rd, 4th, whatever. Because it's every Friday. So this should be a Friday unless we fucked up something. But the point is, here I can then calculate the gross profit myself, right? I can actually then, just take the total sales and subtract it by COGS and get the gross profit. And I add all the absolute figures as well as the margins, right? Because I want to actually see both. And I also want to see even like the discount codes and the refunds. It does show you in the tiles if you go back and forth, but I just want to see everything on one Excel sheet. That's just what I prefer. And then we have a benchmark, and we always want to beat the benchmark. The benchmark is actually something separate. It's a really personal thing that I decided that we want to have this benchmark that we want to beat over time. And we don't beat it every week, but it's definitely a benchmark for a reason, so that we can aim to do better than that benchmark. And you can see essentially the breakdown here. And to be honest, this is a good month in terms of revenue, in terms of margin. This is not the best month. We're hovering around a 10% net profit margin, right? I mean, the contribution margin is 10%, the gross margin is 42%, and then in terms of discount codes and refunds, you can see that we essentially give away 2% of our revenue in terms of discount codes. We give 2% of our revenue in terms of refunds. That's a bit higher than the benchmark, right? We're aiming to stay around 1%. And to be honest, our shipping revenue should also be a bit higher. I'll have a whole other video on how to optimize our shipping revenue. In fact, the app we're developing, Trackidex, has a tool to help you optimize your shipping revenue and essentially provide more compelling options when your customers check out, so that they have more options to choose how they want to, how fast and how they want to get their product shipped to their house, where they are actually happy to pay that amount, given the options and the offers that you provide. So you can see that if we essentially take our total sales, right, and we subtract for refunds, we add actually the shipping revenue because that is revenue. We subtract for the discounts and the refunds, right, we get our net sales. Then we essentially have obviously our cost of goods sold, right? And our cost of goods sold is split into the actual product cost, the shipping cost, the transaction costs, and the fulfillment expenses. Now, the transaction costs, I actually don't like it being under COGS. Again, this is a bit of small details, but what Lifetimely actually means with transaction costs, I think, just a setting that you can add, is, for example, the costs you pay Shopify payments or Stripe or whoever your payment processor is, or PayPal for that matter, every time you make a sale, right? Which is typically 2 or 3% of your revenue. And that for me is more something to be deducted from your sales, less so a part of COGS. But anyway, we have here, you can see that essentially we have no shipping costs. Why? Because for this store and for this product specifically, everything is included under one product cost, right? So the shipping, the fulfillment, and the product cost is included under the one COGS. We have a different store, which I'll probably do also a separate video on, where there it's just very different, right? We have and we actually have a VAT consideration with the other store, which actually complicates things much, much more. So hopefully you don't have VAT, because this store is actually selling in the US. It luckily does not have VAT. It has other considerations, but VAT does complicate a few things here, as well as having separate shipping costs and fulfillment costs, right? With our other store, where we're fulfilling only through a third-party fulfillment center, a 3PL, they charge us a shipping and fulfillment fee. They actually do it all under one umbrella. However, they do it on a per order basis, which we can then also add to Lifetimely as a separate setting if we wish to. Finally, marketing this week. This week for that store, we only ran Facebook and Google costs. You can see the integrations that we have through Lifetimely automatically essentially allow us to see what the cost is. We spent 10K roughly and 13.5K respectively on those marketing channels, leaving us with a contribution margin of 10%. And then we have operating expenses. Once again, you can put what operating expenses you want in terms of Lifetimely. we include quite a few different things. I mean, this includes a Shopify subscription plan, all the apps that we pay for, actually the cost of our CRM agent, things like external kind of apps that the store uses indirectly but are not directly charged through our Shopify account, etc., and a few other overhead costs. Not all of them, but all the ones that I think are more or less associated to that store, right? So you can see we're spending, I mean, close to $800 a week just in overhead costs, and most of that is actually, obviously not only the Shopify subscription plan, because the Shopify subscription plan, it's actually not that expensive, right? Most apps also cost, like, as you know, 10, 20, 30 bucks a month. So then on the right hand side, we kind of have a waterfall chart, which is a bit off, to be honest, but anyway, you get the point. So I think for this video, I just wanted to talk about the pros and cons of Lifetimely, what your expectations can be, and to be honest, we'll actually go into that in a separate video where I will talk about some of the benchmarks. And also what I would say, right, is, again, for this store in this week, right, just as an example, we're making a 10% contribution margin, right? I think as a very strong target is to be above 20%. We have certain weeks where we make above 20%, but we also have other weeks where we're break even or even negative, right? As I said, not all days are positive. Also, not all weeks are positive, right? Of course, the average should be positive, right? If you want to have a profitable business. But I think from what my experience and seeing a bunch of stores and also our stores, if you're above a 20% consistently, that's actually very, very strong. And if you're below, I would say 5%, that's obviously, you're kind of on the knife's edge in terms of actually being unprofitable. If something screws up, if something goes wrong, right, you don't want to be too close to that break-even point. And of course, it's also about the consistency of you being able to hold those profit margins over time consistently and not fluctuate too much of those profit margins, which again, I've discussed in other videos as well, right? That this again all links into, for example, diversifying your marketing channels, not being too dependent on CPC paid ads, where it's all kind of ROAS driven, right? And if your ROAS drops from one day to the next, your profitability will also swing madly, right? So all those things you need to consider. Anyway, hopefully this gave you a bit of an overview in terms of profitability. I'll do other videos where I go more in depth and also talk about some of the other KPIs, not just net profit margins, but other key KPIs that I think are super important for Shopify stores. So see you in the next video. Hey, before you bounce, consider subscribing to our channel, but only if you've actually enjoyed the video and found at least a few valuable things for your Shopify store. Also, check out our free Shopify app, Trackidex. We have a link in the description below. We're developing new features literally every day, and we're also excited to actually hear your feedback on some of the next features we should develop. Thank you, and I'll see you in the next video.